On Sunday, Israel's Supreme Court unanimously ruled that the government of Israel and the Jerusalem municipality must end their 10-year refusal to fulfill commitments set out in the Kotel Agreement to upgrade the egalitarian section of the Kotel. And while the news of today is foremost in our mind, the business of every day still continues. In that agreement 10 years ago, created by Prime Minister Netanyahu, who personally sketched the plan, the original plan out while in meetings. In that agreement, groups like Masorti, the Reform Movement, Women of the Wall, agreed to give up their fight for space in the main area of the Kotel for a permanently established area in the southern end of the wall, south of the Mugrabi ramp that leads up to the Temple Mount. If you've been to the Kotel, if you can imagine what it looks like, there is the men's section, the women's section, the ramp, and on the other side, as part of the archaeological park, is the egalitarian area of the Kotel. After confirmation by the government of this agreement, under pressure, Prime Minister Netanyahu froze his own plan, and it remains unfulfilled to this day. On Sunday, the Supreme Court said that must end. And following that, on Monday, far-right party of Noam brought a new bill before Knesset, which received its first reading on Wednesday, to turn control over all Jewish religious sites in Jerusalem to the chief rabbis of Israel, which would include Ezrat Yisrael, the egalitarian Kotel. In the bill, it states destruction of a holy place would carry a penalty of 7 years in prison. If you don't know what desecration of a holy place means, according to this bill, we are all guilty at this moment. We are sitting in an egalitarian, mixed-seating minyan. There are women here wearing talitot. And if we were in the old city of Jerusalem, after this law passes, we could be liable for 7 years in prison. The first reading of the bill passed 56 to 47. Several Likud lawmakers were conspicuously absent, including the Speaker of the Knesset. When it passed, the author of the bill, MK Avi Moaz, said, in my opinion, ironically, that the passage of this bill would preserve Israel's holy sites and unify the Jewish people, both those in Israel and those in the diaspora. There are so many levels to this story, not just the public story, but the personal of everyone who has visited the Kotel, everyone who cares about observing Judaism in their own way. So I want to take you on a trip through my experiences at the Kotel. My first trip to Israel was in 1981. I went with my parents on a synagogue trip. The first time I ever saw my rabbi not wearing a kippah was in the pool at the hotel. It was strangely shocking, but of course he would not be wearing a kippah in the pool. It was my first trip to Jerusalem. With my parents on Tisha B'Av, we met up with friends of extended family, and we walked the walls of the old city. We listened to the wailing of Echa coming up from below us, of Lamentations. Another day I stood in the plaza of the Kotel, leaning over the mechitza. The mechitza, which is now this tall, was this tall. I have pictures to prove it. There were open spaces every few meters. And I could lean over and listen and see the bar mitzvah of some of the boys who were on our trip. I placed prayers in between the stones in the women's section, and our group gathered in the plaza quietly for a mixed minyan. My shul at the time, 1981, was not yet egalitarian. Just 2 months earlier, I was the first girl to celebrate a bat mitzvah on Saturday morning, and I would not have an aliyah in that shul for 20 more years. I returned to Israel in 1985 with USY, a summer trip. You still landed, walked down the stairs, stood on the ground in front of the airplane, got on a small bus, went to the airport, grabbed your luggage. They rushed us onto a bus. We drove quickly as any bus driver in Israel, which is pretty quick, to Jerusalem, stopping on an overlook to daven mincha in view of the city, both the old and the new, and standing there saying mincha, I started to cry, feeling so blessed and happy at being back in this place that was ours. When we visited the Kotel, the mechitza had grown higher, but it was not yet above my head. It was more solid. The women's section was slightly smaller. And this time on Tisha B'Av, we sat on a grassy patch outside the walls of the old city. And I didn't realize then that experience as being part of a fully egalitarian minyan, reading Lamentations, saying Mariv, might be a metaphor for my future there. Rav Jen and I spent our first year of marriage in Israel. It was our year in seminary, studying there. Our Shabbat congregation was Yedidia, a pluralistic Orthodox shul. They had a women's Torah reading once a month. Girls would read Torah at the celebration of their Benot Mitzvah in a separate women's minyan. We regularly visited the Kotel, the mechitza rising ever higher. And on Shavuot, after studying all night with our classmates and our friends, we walked with thousands of Jerusalemites to the old city, down the stairs to the plaza, and within the plaza held our own Shacharit Minyan at sunrise. And although there were those who yelled at us or pushed us a little, hiding behind the crowds of people, we were able to pray safely. Just 1 year later, the class of JTS students who were there on Shavuot had bottles and dirty diapers thrown at them. What is a desecration of this holy place? Prayer, or those who deliberately bring bottles and dirty diapers to assault those who pray? The following Shavuot, the violence escalated, and Israel's government offered space in the archaeological park at the southern end of the Kotel. Some groups said, this is not the real Kotel. It's not the image in the picture when you think of the Kotel. The Women of the Wall, who were founded in 1988, This was not new. They did not want to pray in a pluralistic setting. They wanted to pray as Orthodox women. It was started as an Orthodox women's minyan, and they wanted to pray in the women's section of the Kotel. The Masorti movement accepted the offer and took on a 30-year responsibility for overseeing this site, providing sidurim, sifrei Torah, tables, umbrellas, chairs, things that are provided by the government in the other areas. At this time, it was only available by day and by reservation. And minyanim that occurred when the archaeological park was open had to pay in order to pray. In 2004, a new entrance was created. The area was separated from the archaeological park. 24-hour access was granted if you'd like to go to Ezrat Yisrael, to the egalitarian Kotel. If you're going, let me know. I will draw you a map how to find the entrance. The number of Jews, both from Israel and the diaspora, using the site grew steadily. And in 2013, Naftali Bennett ordered a temporary platform to be built to give access to the wall, because the access was actually divided and you were not able to touch the Kotel while you were praying. For the last 7 years, we again have not been able to touch the Kotel because a stone fell off the wall, which is something that happens periodically. Around the same time, a stone fell in the men's section. Within 24 hours, it was cleared. Within 48 hours, the tiling was repaired. But we're still waiting. That area of our platform, a temporary platform which still stands, still has a hole from that stone. And thank God the woman who was standing, praying, when that stone fell, was not a foot to her left. Despite these challenges, our movement continues to meet with the government, to negotiate, continues to oversee the area, providing financial and physical support. Over 1,000 services were hosted there last year, and that doesn't even consider the thousands of individuals who visit not just Masorti Jews, not just Reform Jews, but Orthodox couples who come and take pictures before their weddings, of people who wish to approach the wall with their families, Israelis and those from the diaspora alike. In October, I was back in Israel. And I stood at the egalitarian Kotel with Masorti colleagues from around the world, struck especially by the Shema, when we say, the prayer before the Shema, when we say we are gathering from the four corners of the earth. We were there for the World Zionist Congress, and in the days before, we gathered together to say Shacharit, overlooking the stones that you can still see that fell when the temple was destroyed in the year 70. That space is my space. That land is my land. It is our land. This morning, we are all supporting Israel. We read the prayer for the state of Israel. We will conclude with Hatikvah. We are no less Zionist than those who seek to take away our access and demean us. Our Judaism is no less legitimate and personally modeled after the way that the Judaism is approached, that halakha is approached in the Talmud. I personally believe it may have even a little more legitimacy in the way we practice. We send our children in large numbers to be lone soldiers. Our community stands with Israel. Since October 7th, diaspora Jews, not the Haredim, but Orthodox, Masorti, conservative, Reform, and others raised $2 billion for the state of Israel. We put aside our own needs. We ended some fundraisers here in our city. Our community desperately needs a new mikvah. We started talking about it in September before the attack on Israel. And as soon as October 7th happened, we shelved it, saying there were higher priorities for us. We know that our love for Israel, our support for Israel is solid and will endure, and we will continue through all of this to pursue equality, dignity, and freedom of worship from within the state of Israel and from the diaspora. We know that religious pluralism does not demean our holy sites, but strengthens our people and the state. And so I urge you all, if you saw it in the bulletin on Friday, if you haven't seen it, you can grab the sheet. Looks like this. Thank you, Kim, for making copies. It has a QR code. After Shabbat, please read and sign this petition. It is going to the Speaker of the Knesset, who deliberately was not even present for discussions on this bill. It goes to Prime Minister Netanyahu. It goes to President Herzog, all of whom say they support pluralistic Jews, to say, please stop this. Please recognize the damage this does to the unity of the Jewish people, to the support of Israel from outside of Israel. Insist that Israel continue and do better at recognizing the rights of all Jews at our holy site. And because it's always good to start with a little thanks, thank them for acting to end terrorism, but ask them to make sure that crimes are not committed against us.